Hi, my name is Jason Garriotte, and you probably don't know who I am. But I'm one of those players that the top pros that you have heard of run through on their way to the gold in most of these tournaments. I started playing pickleball in early 2019 after finally listening to my parents, who had been playing at East Naples since like 2014. I'd always been like, yeah, I'll get to it when I'm done with tennis. But then when I finally tried it, I had to take it seriously and have fun with it, obviously, because I'm wearing a tuck shirt. And I think if you just spend a few minutes here listening to my perspective on a few pickleball-related things, it may clear up a few of what I think are about to be publicly proven misconceptions within the pickleball community. But before I get into that, I need to give you a quick rundown of who I am and what brought me here to give you context for later. And just to let you know, a big part of this is me pointing out my failures because what I thought was going to happen did not happen. So, I grew up playing lots of sports competitively, including baseball, soccer, basketball, wrestling, track, and of course my favorite, tennis. I played all the top regional USTA tournaments, had rankings from the 12s through the 18s in Northern Indiana, played the Junior Davis Cup a couple of times, went on to play Division II tennis where I was nationally ranked, transferred to both Purdue and Indiana during the 6 years it took me to finish college, trying to walk on. And both coaches wouldn't even give me a chance or let me practice with the team, even though I had the credentials at that time to do so, but that's another story. Then at 26, I played my first Futures qualifier, which is the lowest level of the tennis tour. And for the next 12 years, I went on to play over 30 of those. Short tours of just a few to several in a row, reaching a career high US professional tennis ranking of 301 in 2002. And this is for Sherry, on the same list as Agassi and Sampras at the time. I won some rounds, but I usually lost first round, sometimes badly. But I do have an official ATP result with earnings from a tournament in Italy, which made me officially a pro tennis player, which I'll get into in a minute. During this time, I was also a tennis teaching pro at a couple of clubs, and then I was the assistant women's tennis coach at Furman from 06 to 09, and the men's assistant at Elon for a year. Then it was business projects for a few years, which brings me to pickleball. Right before the 2019 US Open, I had moved to Naples because my parents lived there and I work online, so generally I can be where I want. So I started playing pickleball and it turned out to be pretty fun. But right away I wanted to play singles, even for the better workout. But couldn't find many people that wanted to play singles, and they really couldn't challenge me anyway. And rec doubles involved me hitting a serve or hitting a return and then watching the other three people play until one of them gets a pop-up or something and they slam it at me and I might get to try to reset or something, but that was worthless. I also was trying to figure out how the tournament system worked. I'd ask people about rankings and they'd say, no, it's ratings. And I'd say, no, rankings. Where are the rankings? And the magazines for that year at the US Open had Tyson, Kyle, and Ben ads, but all three of them listed him as the number one ranked pickleball player in the world. And this was before the APP and the PPA even. And I'm gonna be honest here, as I was watching, I was like, these are the best in the world? I mean, the whole sport's played in the service box. I think I can hang. Which in my own defense, I think is a pretty common response. Now, I'm going to clarify right here. I was definitely wrong about what I thought at that time. But I wasn't as far off as it may have seemed back then. It was really my failures that made it not happen. Especially people like Arnold and Staksrud and Ignatowicz. And now Alshon. I mean, these guys are doing what I thought I was going to do. There was no APP, PPA, or MLP. I mean, I really couldn't even figure out how I could go pro if I wanted to. So I just decided to move on and I'd come back to pickleball when they got more organized. I mean, I remember making the decision. Then after a couple of months of not playing, I decided that made no sense. I was having fun playing, who cares? So I moved back to Florida, to Fort Myers, in January 2020 because I saw on the map that there was Brooks Parks, there was a whole bunch of courts, and then the Pickleplex was north of there, and I was like, there's gonna be games at one of those two places, or at least courts that I can go play on. And be in Southwest Florida. So as I was getting settled, the deadline came for the US Open and this pro tournament at Simone's YMCA place that both had singles divisions, which I had not been able to play a tournament of yet. I still didn't know what level I was, but I knew I didn't want to play down. So I decided to sign up for the pro division in Simone's tournament and 5-0 in the US Open. And I thought, well, I'll get a shot at the pros, and even if I lose, which I didn't, if I win the 5-0 US Open, which I did, I'll know I'm somewhere in between and justified to pursue pro. So, this is where we look at one of the highly debated pickleball topics. What makes someone a pro player? Obviously, everyone has a right to their opinion, but I think this explanation might clear it up for at least most people. There is a system, and it makes sense. Sort of, but it is what it is. In pickleball, there are currently a few rating systems that allow people to compete at their level. I think overall, most pickleball players kind of know what level they are if they've been playing for a little while. Like, yeah, I'm a 4.0 and I'm trying to move up to 4.5 or, something like that. So the highest rating-based division I've ever seen in a pickleball tournament is 5.0. Then it's the pro division. The division is called pro by the governing bodies of the sport that we play called pickleball and tournament directors. Now, in my opinion, at least at the pro level, the duper rating is the most overall accurate because it's driven by a dynamic algorithm that takes into account more than just wins and losses. It also allows the pro division a more appropriate spread of the levels. For example, Tyson's singles duper rating is a 7.02, and mine is a 6.12. So I am about in the middle of a range of skill levels that spans about the same difference as a 3.0 to a 5.0, and I'm about in the middle. I'm like a 4.0 playing a 5.0 when I play Tyson, only it's Tyson. And this spread is still without any of the high-level elite athletes that the other sports have. I'm not saying that the top pickleball pros are not top athletes, but anyone in athletics knows the difference, and they know that pickleball has not seen any of that yet. If they're that level of athlete, the sport is just not lucrative enough to attract them. Yet. But it's coming. So right now, some people would say if you're playing the pro division that you're a pro pickleball player. Just like you would say, I'm a 5.0 pickleball player. It's a division. It doesn't mean that you're making a living playing in pickleball tournaments, but it tells people your level right away, so it gives you context for a conversation. Now, there are also people that would say, just because you're competing in the pro division doesn't mean that you can claim to be a pro pickleball player. Anyone can just sign up if they want to donate a couple $100 to the pros. Now, although this used to be true, the APP Pro draws are limited in size, and it's based on a combination of factors including rating and registration date and tournament director discretion. And the PPA is now having feed-in draws, where there's a pre-playoff on the event day in order to get into the main draw, based on ratings. So just like other sports, these organizations have created ranking systems for what they consider to be the pro players for the sport of pickleball. Each having their own criteria because they all want to become the standard. The APP, the PPA, and the World Pickleball Rankings are all based on points awarded by winning rounds. And Duper is producing ranking systems based upon ratings, highlighting the highest levels. So if you're a player on any of these pro player ranking lists, then you're a pro pickleball player, based upon the standards of the governing bodies of the sport of pickleball. It's almost like they make the rules. Okay, now that we've established what a pro pickleball player technically is, we can dig into where this line is between the highest rated skill levels and the pro level players. As far as singles goes, what I've found is that up to 5.0, I can pass them and they can't pass me most of the time. But when I play a pro, it doesn't work like that. It's something about the speed, the heaviness, the action on the ball, and movement, court positioning, anticipation skills, along with their hands. So I have to mix up the drops, I have to cat and mouse, I have to dig out a lot of balls. I have to try to win the point multiple times, and I have to be patient. And then they just don't miss very often. So like when I come in on a return against JW, he passes me probably clean 2 out of 3 times, at least by the second ball. Then if I try to pass him off of whatever he comes in off of, he crushes it or just does whatever he wants. Like I do against 5.0s, which coincidentally is that 1-point duper spread. Well, the bigger issue here is that traditionally there weren't a lot of high-level pickleball players. So if they had a pro division, people had to travel from all over to even fill up the draw. So they're trying to transition out of that. I think eventually we're going to have something like the open division that's going to be like 5 to 6, or it's going to get even higher than that, where it's like pros are going to go up to 9 because all these other players are going to come in and the spread is going to be required. Or like table tennis has thousands. Like the UTR in tennis that goes up to like 15 or something. Like pickleball will eventually get there, but there isn't a reason to separate them that much. But right now it's still 2 points. And these other below pro divisions will be just stacked with athletes from all kinds of sports that just weren't perfectly built for the sport of pickleball. Like an elite few will. They probably even end up having like big sponsorships and prize money and stuff, but they're not gonna beat Ben Johns, like ever. Like it's not even gonna be a chance. And when you're watching those things online, you know, and they're battle, and then they win like 1-1, that's because a 7-0 is playing like a 5-4, you know? Or a 6-0 that's on a hot day, right? Like moving through the draw, and then they hit a wall, which is Ben Johns or Tyson or JW. It reminds me when I was playing futures tennis qualifiers. Sometimes we would have like 140 guys show up on a Thursday to try to fill 128 spots for a draw the next day, which were filled on a point and ranking system all the way down to drawn out of a hat for some spots. If you got in, the goal was to win 4 rounds over the next 4 days just to get into the main draw. Then win 1 round, which would be an ATP point. Then you would have a world ranking and access to the Pro Tour. Like you could get into all the tournaments depending on how many points you ended up getting, but you now were in the club. Many times I played a few tournaments in a row, and sometimes we'd go to the next one first, or sometimes I would stay behind depending on whatever the situation was. Most of the time I went to the new site so I could be practicing there for the next tournament, but sometimes I stayed behind depending on if I won a round or two, and would see when the main draw players showed up. I mean, you could tell right away they were different. Their height, their build, I mean, really, even the way they carried themselves, you could tell. Through the whole qualifier, I'd watched like amazing feats of athleticism and focus and pulling off crazy points to win matches. High level, up and coming collegiate athletes and juniors and pros from all over the world, all trying to break through and qualify for the main draw. And a select few of these people would earn their way into that main draw, and then they would play someone with just a few ATP points, like 800 to 1200 in the world or something. Probably 80% of them lose first round and don't get a point. Many times losing pretty bad. Then the top finishers in that main draw are the ones that are playing like the qualifiers and wild cards and stuff and losing first round in the next stage, which is called challengers. And the main draws of these are generally like 300 to 1000 in the world or something. Then there are those high-level tournaments that are somewhere between the challengers and the grand slams. The ones you see on like a random TV or in some city that the top pros play. Bigger money, bigger points. And then we get to like the top 100 that are the ones that play in grand slams that you see on TV. These other players at every level below that will lose badly to those guys in the top 100 most of the times if they play them. And that's not even to mention Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, who beat all of them for 10 years here. Now, with 87 million tennis players worldwide, with billions of dollars generated annually, having a massive impact on the economies of the world alongside sports like football or soccer, basketball, table tennis, and cricket, to become one of the elite in any one of these sports comes from a combination of factors that has to come together just right for every athlete. Now, I'm not going to go into the full details here, but I'm just going to point out the obvious, that the foundation of all sports and excelling in them is genetics. Anyone in the field of athletics knows this to be true, and it's really not even open for debate. No matter how hard someone trains or gets mentally focused or whatever, they're never going to be a center in the NBA or a lineman in the NFL if they don't have the genetics for it. I guess technically without chemical assistance, I'm saying. And this is just obvious factors like size. Then you have the genetics for all the other physical aspects like speed, endurance, strength, agility, and the intangibles like focus, intuition, and decision making. One of the most common paths for a pro athlete in any sport is that at a young age, they had the opportunity to play several sports, and at some point, the opportunities and abilities matched up best with one of them, so they focused on it to become the best that they could be, probably putting in more than 10,000 hours of blood, sweat, and tears. Years of muscle memory and mental training to hone their ability to play this sport, committing their life to this quest. So generally, this decision is based on the perceived long-term value of being good at whatever sport it is that they're going to choose. Now you have pickleball. Yes, it is the fastest growing sport in the United States. But right now there are like 5 million players, and even the top few pros barely make 6 figures if they know how to do clinics and are good at sponsorships. Just in the past year or so, there's been a handful of tennis players that have come in and started to beat the top pros pretty much right away. Yes, it was singles, but anyone watching can tell that they're just following up with doubles right afterwards, and it does take a little longer to adjust from tennis to the doubles. We're talking about some like programmed instincts that have to be rewired. And I'm definitely not talking down the tennis level of the top pros that are in pickleball right now, because they were and are world-class tennis players. But unless I'm missing or forgetting somebody, none of the top pickleball pros ever were in that beyond that challenger stage, even in their prime. Maybe DeHart or Rettenmeier, they were both top 100 give or take, but they definitely played the pro tennis tour for years. And if you didn't know who was who and they were out just practicing with, Federer or Nadal, you wouldn't even know who was going to win until they started playing out points. The difference is so nuanced, but the people who know. Fortunately in tennis, it's pretty obvious that the average person wouldn't even get a racket on a serve from Djokovic or Isner. And it takes a bit of work to even really rally a tennis ball, and I think most people get that. But in pickleball, there are a lot of rules and aspects of the way the game plays that really neutralizes these overwhelming physical disadvantages that you find in a lot of other sports like tennis. The court is small, the paddle in the ball is light, the serve is underhand, and you can't even go all the way into the net to slam it. The sport becomes more weighted towards tactical and strategic maneuvering and execution, but it doesn't swing it all the way that way. In fact, in my opinion, the most important aspect of pickleball is hand speed. It's what determines your starting level. Then, as you develop other skills, you will win more or move up skill levels. Because the bottom line is, whoever has the best hands can speed the ball up first. As anyone that plays pickleball knows, singles and doubles are very different. I would say the primary difference between singles and doubles is there's no so-called like open space to hit winners through without dinking and dropping and working the point a little bit, because there's two people in the same court. What this does is it slows the game way down to where anybody can hit it to anybody that they want at any time. So matchups and partnerships are huge factors, and there's really no way to isolate them. Because if there's a level discrepancy, the lower level player will get isolated. And then it doesn't matter who his partner is unless they get out of the way. After the lockdowns were lifted in 2020 and the APP and the PPA got things going, I was lucky enough to train pretty hard with Ryan Sherry, and I played in 2 PPAs that fall. I got embarrassingly destroyed in the first round. I was choking up like ping pong on an old worn out paddle tech with no grit, and I drew Zane first round. Right as he was coming up, it was indoors, I never played with a bunch of people around and all that kind of stuff, and he double bageled me. I didn't even know what hit me. He was passing me clean by like just inches off the edge of my paddle, but like over and over and over again. It was partially because I was choking up, but come on. It was Zane hit passing shots. In doubles, I was playing with this guy I didn't know, wasn't a pro. We just both wanted to play pro division. Ended up winning one in the back draw, but against Deacon and Yates, it was pretty ugly. So after this result, probably because of Sherry's paddle preference, I switched to the Franklin. Holding at the bottom and working out a good weight balance, and finally it felt like tennis, somewhat at least. Over 40 years of muscle memory was like accessible all of a sudden. If only I'd have known about the Electrum then. My level instantly jumped like a half point right here, I think. And especially the consistency of dinks and resets and stuff, it was solid. I feel like this is when I really was actually playing at the pro level finally. So when I went to the PPA in Vegas, I was ready, I thought. Pro singles, I ended up losing 11-9, 11-9, and then 15-12, but it was different. It was just choking. It was totally mental. I just, making bad choices at the wrong point. But I was in the game. In men's pro doubles, I just played with a guy in the Players Game Partners again. He was, like a 4-5 from Minnesota, nice guy, just so I could get in the draw since I was going there anyway. We lost bad first round to Althoff and Navratil. In second round, we had what seemed like a dream match for a pro draw. Tyson McGuffin had gotten sick and had to drop out. So Randall Emmett, of Hollywood fame, but not a pro player, swooped in and got Riley Newman to play doubles with him in the tournament. I discussed with my partner how we were going to isolate Randall and force Riley to come over in order to open up the court. So we were up 8-1 when we switched sides. They took not only the changeover, but both timeout as they strategized with their coach, Wes Burrows. And I could tell we were really only winning points because Randall was getting in Riley's way. And they were working out how to stop that. So they decided to isolate my partner. Randall was even yelling it out. Yeah, hitting to the right guy and we got him. He was like putting on a show and getting the crowd going and all that kind of thing. So it basically became Riley versus my partner, and I was watching what was happening, but I really couldn't do anything about it. I mean, we were staying in the point, but it just takes one pop-up from Riley, and if you aren't able to reset it, point's over. And my partner just never seen a ball like Riley's. So he'd drop, and then, that's the one, it's gone. So we lost 15-10. But after seeing how this went, and then watching the next team beat them and how they approached it, it showed me a lot about the game. Then, a few weeks later, at a tournament in Punta Gorda, I was playing pro doubles with a junior at the time and a rising star, Ronan Cameron. We ran into a recent tennis convert, Travis Rettenmeyer, who was playing with a guy who had never even played the sport. So essentially, it became 2-on-1. And I think there's a good chance that if his partner hadn't been in his way, that he probably would have beat us that day. Mostly because none of us were playing tactical pro pickleball. It was just banging with a few drops. If you watched as Colin and Ben John started playing together, or Ben and Simone, or any other of the top mixed pro pickleball, they're all using what McNasty and I were kind of calling alpha beta doubles. Although he may have a better term by now. But I remember as Colin and Ben were working it out, one of the biggest vulnerabilities I saw was, even though Colin was staying out of the way and Ben was pretty much playing the court, he was just resetting and assisting. If Colin got more engaged because the opponents were able to get it to them, he would start hitting too many balls, and then there would be a confusion over who took the ball. And that was their biggest vulnerability. Other than that, it seemed to be working, and then now they've kind of evolved beyond that. But the biggest factor in any of this is like what I said from the beginning. Whoever has the best hands can speed up the ball first. Just to give you an example, imagine Riley Newman hits you a serve as your partner waits at the kitchen line. You hit the return down the middle as Riley hits a drop to one of the two corners that bounces in the kitchen, and he's at the kitchen line around the same time that drop bounces. So you have to be able to hit a dink off of his third shot without popping it up enough that he can do anything with that next ball, with him standing right in front of you at the kitchen line. And if you pull that off, you and your partner have to win a cat and mouse point against Riley Newman. Just positioning himself in front of the ball every time he moves you somewhere. Knowing that if you ever speed it up from a defensive position, he has you, and a lot of times, even if you're up on him, he will dig his way back out and win that. That's the reality of it. And every time you hit the ball over there, it's Riley Newman. What I'm saying here is it takes a certain level of player to even be able to avoid getting taken out in the first shot or two. I mean, it's like boxing. Tyson, these guys would come in against Tyson, ooh, I think I'm all right, and then one hit from him and they're like they didn't even know what was coming. That's what it's like. And if you watch mixed, and again, the women are great, but it's the pickle jar thing, right? Like, men have this strength in their forearms that everyone really knows about, and that's what really determines that kitchen line stuff a lot, where guys can hit it hard from here, harder than the girls. So they're cross-courting it, right? Anytime a guy steps in and just does that, all of a sudden the point moves. I see with Matt Wright all the time, where just him getting in there one time changes the point progression of the point from there. Not every time, but you can feel it, and it's because there's something else on that ball. And if you haven't played one of those people, you don't know that difference. For example, many times when I'm giving lessons to a doubles team, I simulate playing a doubles team against them by myself. And when we're playing out these points, one of the things that I'm doing a lot is trying to get them disciplined on playing tactically instead of just banging. Because it's kind of an illusion that there's the open space, because I can cover it in an instant. Because my hands are better than theirs, I can handle their speed ups, or I can speed it up anytime I want. And either reset it so that they can try something smarter on the next shot, or I teach them a lesson with my own speed up, and then explain it to them. Even in lessons, when I'm not even trying to win, I usually do, but it's just because of misses. But I know that there's a level where that won't work anymore. What I'm saying is I'm not even one of those top pros I'm talking about. When you're watching these top pros play, you're making assumptions about what you think you would be able to do if you were playing against them. You might even be tempted to think that all that dinking that they're doing would be necessary if they played against you. But it wouldn't. Because they could just come at you anytime they wanted and probably win the hands battle. That's part of why they're top pros. Of course, there's a combination of skills and athleticism and all that come into play when they're competing against each other. But none of them don't have faster hands than the people below pro, or they wouldn't make it. You could just speed it up whenever they wanted in one of those 4-person combinations. I mean, we've all been there. Sometimes you're the one that's never missing, and sometimes you're the one that's all missing. It depends on where you're playing and whether you're playing with people better than you or not. I think once the athleticism level jumps here significantly, we're gonna see a very different looking sport. Things like one up, one back, partners screening each other to block views of the court. Ernie jumps will get ridiculous, from over half the court probably. It's just a super small space for 2 elite athletes to be working within, and it limits the value of their combined skills. There's too much overlap. So it's going to evolve as new strategies are developed. It'll be interesting to see where it goes, but it will definitely look different in the coming years. And I'd really like to see the 2 versus 1 format become acceptable within the pickleball community and rec play to be used as a training tool. One of the biggest complaints I hear anywhere is that nobody can find anybody better than them that will play with them, right? Somehow everyone is better than who they play with. Well, what happens, and the reason I rarely go play rec anymore, is that if you're the best player on the court, you never get to touch the ball. So why would better players go play in rec games? So if it became acceptable for a higher level player to come out to rec and play 2-on-1, then everyone that is looking for better games would get to see this better ball and higher level play once in a while. While the better players would get to work out their legs and practice their strategy and ball control and things like that. So it's a win-win. But right now, I don't think that most rec players understand that the court is small and easily coverable by a fast athlete, especially one that plays singles. So would consider it offensive to even ask if, hey, you want to play me 2-on-1? But I would win that game at almost every open rec. But I do think upcoming events is going to help clear this up for the pickleball community in general. And it might just help with the growth of the game. All right, if you've gotten all the way to here, I really appreciate you watching the whole thing. I hope this gave you a little perspective. It's just some thoughts that I've had the whole time, and I felt like putting it together and sharing it with people. No matter what, it's going to be fun to see what comes. All right, see you out there.